All right, everyone, we are in week 6, so getting close to the halfway point. Um, the topic this week is development and quality of life. Um, I want to start by saying two things. Number one, I highly suggest you watch this video. It's just one of my favorite sustainability focused internet videos. I think it's really interesting, tells a really strong story in a really short period of time. So that's the first thing. Please take the time to watch that. The second thing is I want to point out that we do have a Zoom meeting this week. It's on Wednesday from 5:30 to about 7:30 p.m. This will be on Zoom, so you don't have to drive down to Dover. There's a link here. There's also a link in this Zoom room down here. Um, One of the main purposes of this week is to go over the itinerary. So here's a direct link to the itinerary. It's also in this folder. I want to point this out. We have this travel documents folder, okay? So just keep in mind this is a tentative itinerary, but it's, as you'll see, very specific. And it'll help you do your blog this week because you have locations and addresses and all that. And also I provide web links to a lot of the places that we're going to see. Okay, so we'll go over that this week, so I'm not going to take the time now. A brief overview of last week. Remember, it was social and environmental justice. Hopefully you have a really good sense of what those two things are. Remember that social justice is just the belief that everyone deserves equal economic, social, and political rights and opportunities. It's not about everybody being equal. We understand that inequality is going to happen. But if you could sum it up in one word, it's opportunity. Okay, so everyone should have the opportunity to achieve a good life. And in order to have that opportunity, you have to have all these other sort of supplemental rights and opportunities. You have to be able to participate in the political system and so forth. You have to have economic opportunity. Okay, so it's just about opportunity. It's kind of controversial, I think, not necessarily because we believe that, but the way you apply it. If you think about the application, how do we have a more socially just society? Right now, we have a lot of social injustice happening, and so in order to make it socially just, you're going to have to sort of rejigger some of the power structures in society. And I guess in case you don't know, people with power tend to not like to release any of that power. And in fact, if they feel like they're being coerced to be released of some of that or relieved of some of that power, they feel like they're being oppressed. And that's another story for another day, but that has a lot to do with what we're seeing today. So anyway, the application is what tends to be more controversial. But hopefully you understand that the concept itself shouldn't be. I don't think the application should be either, but then again, I'm not one with a lot of power. Then we talked about environmental justice. The main way that people usually define this is that the belief that everyone should share equally in environmental benefits and burdens, right? So the benefits of environmental benefits, clean air, clean water, clean soil, et cetera, everyone, regardless of who they are, regardless of their economic status, should have access to that, at least a fundamental level of it. But then the environmental burdens, which is really where this movement started in the 80s, with the siting of landfills. So things like, where are landfills put? Where do they put factories that spew all this pollution? Where do they put petrochemical processing plants that contaminate the water? Farms that have contaminate the soil or have all this like basically smells coming off of them. So there's a lot of different environmental burdens that are spread unequally in our society. If you want a modern example of this, you can look up Cancer Alley in the southern United States, and what it has to do with the petrochemical industry. So anyway, this is an issue that still exists today and something that's a big part of sustainability. Then we looked at the lifeboat ethics article, which hopefully you understand why that's controversial. Maybe we can have a discussion about it, but it brings up some decent, reasonably good points in that if we have the Earth can only carry a certain amount of people before we really start depleting our resources and having problems, then we need to consider carrying capacity. But I think maybe, throwing the poor off the proverbial boat is probably not the way to do that. We can have a discussion about that. But and then we talked about neocolonialism, which again is kind of a controversial term. But we don't really have colonialism anymore. Maybe, I don't know, maybe Greenland might have something to say about that, but um, in all seriousness, we really don't. And so this sort of new form of colonialism is more like political and economic colonialism. Um, okay, so those are some really, I think, provocative topics. So hopefully, I'm happy to have discussions about all of these. There's usually not one right answer to these. Okay, so on to this week, we're doing development and quality of life. Um, and so, we've talked a little bit about the sort of inadequacies of the modern economic model and the modern economic system, in particular vis-a-vis externalities and non-market value, but also this concept of sustainable growth. And we just sort of like a widespread assumption that if you just grow an economy, that's really good and that's all we need, and all we need to do is pursue economic growth. But I think it's obvious a lot of the negative impacts of that, infinite growth model are all around us in terms of resource depletion and climate change and so forth. So it's not working anymore. It still works for some people, and if we want to, even Herman Daly, would support this, saying that we do want to bring people out of poverty, but all the indicators are that continuing to grow as we are is just going to be disastrous. Okay, so there's problems with the model. This week we really focus on what do we really want to pursue. This one is this week is almost entirely about quality of life and the sort of social side of economic models. It's not so much environmental, but we'll go over these different metrics. So if we want the economy to do a certain thing, right? So we want to, one of the things, per the steady state economy folks, is we wanted to provided the highest quality of life for the most people. So if we want to do that, we need to measure quality of life, because it's not simple necessarily, and there's a bunch of different ways to do it, and we'll go over some of them this week. And that's really what it's all about: is how do we measure quality of life? We'll go over the Human Development Index, which is something that's been around for decades, and it's a good expansion on GDP. It includes GDP, and you add education and lifespan, basically. Um, we also look at the inequality adjusted human development index, which is the human development index, but also integrates inequality into it. Then we'll look at the World Happiness Report, which may seem kind of, I don't know, unserious, but it's actually, this report is created by very serious researchers, and they use very serious statistics and um, survey methods and so forth to get to this. And the basic premise is, if we want to know how someone is doing, just ask them. It may sound super simple, and really it is, but it actually makes sense if you think about it, because what it does is sort of eliminate some of the assumptions and biases and so forth. If I'm like this big hoity-toity researcher and I'm like, this is what's part of a high quality of life: education and lifespan and money. Well, if for some people money's not very important, maybe, I don't know, having a strong religious affiliation, maybe just having access to the outdoors is everything to me. That's what makes me happy. So if that's the case, everyone has the sort of different ways, that they define their own quality of life. So if you want to know how they're doing, you just ask them. And they have a whole, it's very scientific and statistical and everything. But it's a pretty interesting one in that it kind of eliminates all that in any kind of bias and so forth. Then we have the genuine progress indicator, which I find really interesting, because really what it is the GDP, right? So it takes the basic GDP model, but then you add positive externalities, things like, I don't know, safe neighborhoods and having clean air, access to parks, whatever. And then you subtract negative externalities, health outcomes, environmental pollution, et cetera. So really what it tries to do is it tries to internalize all these externalities, both the positive and the negative. And then you take the GDP and you adjust the number accordingly. We'll also go over the triple bottom line, which we've kind of alluded to earlier, but this is the idea that companies can pursue something other than the bottom line, which is just money. And so they integrate environmental and social sustainability, or the three Ps: people, planet, profit, and integrate that into their own business model. Um, and then finally, we'll go over this one, which I really like. It's a certified B Corps, a B Corp, C-O-R-P. And so what I really like about this is, the average person, and myself included, like I don't know everything about every company out there. So if you're going to buy something, you look for this certified B Corp logo. It'll be on the packaging or on their website. And if you see that, you know that they are addressing sustainability in some robust way. Um, and it just makes it a lot easier. If you have to make a decision, all else being equal, I'm buying B Corp every single time. It's a really robust logo or label. It's not easy to get this certification, and so that's something that makes it easier for consumers. And I'm a big proponent of anything that can make it easier to address sustainability. And this is a really good way to do it. Okay, so um, I just want you to think about this week, what makes a high quality of life? How do you measure it? Measure it? What are some of the pros and cons of each of these metrics? Um, and how does this all address sustainability? And I'll just one thing I want to point out is this video from the first part of the lesson um, is just an outstanding video. In a really short period of time, it summarizes a lot of the things that we're talking about. And what's particularly interesting about it is that it's from RFK, not RFK Jr., but RFK, the original, the OG RFK back in the 60s, who would have been president almost certainly of the United States if he weren't assassinated. And it's just, I think, kind of fascinating to think of a major political candidate talking about some of these issues in public. And maybe it gives us hope that we can have a political candidate in the future that would do that. But it's just really a good, effective speech, really short. Okay, well, I'm going to leave it at that. I'm looking forward to seeing everyone on Zoom this week. And of course, if you have any questions, reach out. But I hope you have a great week.